Recording started. Hello, it's a public meeting of AsyncAPI community. It's Tuesday. I don't really know what day exactly, but it's Tuesday, it's morning, and where most of us are with coffee, and we have few new faces, at least me. I don't recall Gerald. Did you join the meeting?
No,
before?
it's my first meeting.
Okay, cool. Do you want to introduce yourself to the group?
Sure.
Awesome.
So my name is Gerald. I work for MuleSoft, but in the training department. So I'm not involved in the AsyncAPI engineering and product initiatives. But we have training and a code base that we use for some of our courses that is heavily based on message-based integration. And I started writing AsyncAPI specs for that. And so I discovered that there is no anypoint MQ binding, which is the message broker we use. And so I thought I'll start writing one. And that's why I'm here. And I have a question on that already, but I'll wait my turn.
Okay, welcome. And awesome that you just started playing with AsyncAPI and you already want to contribute. So that's even
well,
awesome.
you don't get far without a binding, no? I thought. I'm forced to contribute, but I'm happy to do that. And yes.
Okay, cool.
It's worked well because Dale is making the binding I need. So
You're the lucky one. And I think we, at least also for me, but I'm not good in names, so apologize if I don't recall you, but I think Rakesh and Pavan, I think you're the first time on this meeting. If not, I apologize. You have a chance if you want to say hello or introduce yourself. You don't have to, but it's a right moment to do it.
Hey, hi, this is Rakesh. I'm practice head for integration department in a company called Rubicon Red. We are working in a number of products like MuleSoft, Solace. I've specifically been working with Oracle Open API specification. We have just started with Solace and we have been using Async. We have not much used Async, but we have just started to. So thought of like knowing more about it. Yeah, this is my first meeting. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Welcome. I'm not sure if you know that we have also a Slack channel. So if you want to also chat with us, like after the meeting, because we meet every week, every 2 weeks only, then you can also talk to us on Slack. Just, yeah, if you don't know.
Okay.
So before we jump into the main meeting, anyone else wants to do something? Three, two, one. Okay. So the first item on the agenda is question and answer. So I guess, Gerald, you'd like to start with question.
Okay. Yes, I can. The first problem I ran into, now I started writing that binding, the binding objects for our message broker. And of course, I started writing AsyncAPI documents that use those binding objects. And I want to ensure that they are syntactically correct. And I've seen there's a JSON schema for the AsyncAPI spec itself. But the moment I enter my binding objects, that is invalid. And I started writing JSON schema documents for my binding objects too, but they don't hang together. So what can I do? Or is there a path forward that you envision for that?
So if I understood correct, so you would like to write a JSON schema for the binding definition for what's the name of the broker? Sorry.
Anypoint MQ,
MQ.
but it doesn't really matter. No, yeah. None of the bindings have JSON schemata, as far as I've seen.
Yeah.
I'm writing a JSON schema because it's nice to do that. But the binding object schema is not called from the AsyncAPI JSON schema. So if I validate my JSON API document, there's no way for it to essentially load the correct binding. And I don't know how to bridge that gap.
I mean, so for now, we don't, I mean, in the spec, there's nothing about schemas for bindings. We don't have them. But just recently, Maciej, did you manage to create this issue in AsyncAPI?
Yeah, I created the issue in the spec repository.
Yeah. Can you paste the link here in the chat?
Yeah.
So
I saw the issue, yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. So we just need to proceed with this, because I think everybody agree that it would be super useful to require that the binding has its own JSON schema, so we can validate it or use it in the UI like Maciej needs it. So we just need to proceed with pushing it into the spec.
Will that issue address not just the fact that there are schemata for the binding objects, but also that the AsyncAPI schema links to those schemata?
So the issue, like usually changes in the spec, it's just changes in the spec.
Mm-hmm.
But then the thing is just about supporting it in the parser. So it's all about the like the official JavaScript parser. It just uses the AsyncAPI JSON schema to validate AsyncAPI documents. But once we have bindings with JSON schemas, then the parser should also get those schemas and validate bindings against those individual schemas.
Okay, understood. Yeah, that would work.
But that's not part of this issue, let's say. Like first we need to have it in the spec to later support it in the tooling.
Sure.
But this can be already investigated. So another topic after Q&A, we're just gonna quickly share the proposal for how we will handle changes in the spec. And one of these steps in like proposing changes is doing some proof of concept on existing tooling, how a change in the spec would work with these tools. So I guess in case of this binding and schema for binding, that would be a perfect use case for this flow, like to show the idea and show how it's going to work with the parser. But yeah, later on that proposal. But did you also say that already when you put a binding, you get error that there's something invalid, or did I miss it?
No. It was a conceptual problem I had. I didn't even try, but I did do both. Start writing schemata and writing an AsyncAPI document, and there was no link to my schema. So I wanted to just discuss with you what's the plan.
Any other questions?
Will we go through roadmap or anything like that, or what's immediately planned? Or is that not part of this meeting?
We didn't plan, but if you have some questions regarding the roadmap, then feel free to ask.
Yep, happy to reply as well. Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to hijack the meeting.
Feel free to do it. I mean, we don't have anything super specific on the agenda. I mean, I have some updates that I would like to mention in the call, some links, but the first item on the agenda is also always Q&A, because this meeting is for the community. So if you already have some specific questions, then feel free to ask.
Yes, so two more questions. One is very generic, simply that I'm working with 2.0.0 of the spec now, and I just want to be aware if there's any changes imminent that will invalidate what I'm doing. And the second question is, there are a few things in the spec that I would have thought are obvious, but are not there. So I missed something, and I wanted to see whether there's a plan to add those, or whether it was consciously decided not to do that. And the most obvious to me is something like a message ID, you know, which every broker has. But I found correlation IDs in the spec, but I didn't find a message ID. So I'm sure there is an argument for that. I just didn't see it. Those are my two questions. Thank you.
So I think that as per message ID, I think there's an issue open. Maybe I think Walid opened.
Yeah, there's
maybe.
already an issue from Walid, so
Yeah.
I can.
And
find it.
so that this one should be making it probably in the next version. We don't know yet which version it will be. We don't know if it's gonna be 3 or if it's gonna be a new major version or if it's gonna be a minor version. For sure, not a patch version, because patch versions only have, you know, fixes in grammar and typos and all this stuff, right? And minor things that doesn't change anything. And I think message ID is coming. Then regarding if we're gonna ship something that might invalidate what you're working on, I will say so. Because there are two things that we're or I mean I will say so now. I mean, you can expect it to happen, because there are two major things that we need to solve before we continue developing more features, and it's publish subscribe stuff that people get confused. Like we all get confused, even myself sometimes, like I'm getting it wrong. So we need to somehow solve this problem.
What do you mean, the terminology, or what?
Some people get it the opposite. Like,
I did the same, but it's very consistent. No, it's from the client's perspective. Just
yes,
like a get is from the client's perspective.
Exactly. But if you're working with brokers in, you know, in private, let's say, imagine microservice architecture with a Kafka broker or routing queue broker, something like this, then it becomes weird to look at it from this perspective, and most people get it wrong. So yeah, we need to make it less error prone, I would say, and less less or harder to get it wrong.
Okay.
So yeah, this is something that we'll have to solve. And I'm not saying that this is gonna be a breaking change, but most likely will be. Then there's also another one, and it's reusing channel definitions. So channel definitions right now can, you know, have channels, the name of the channel, and then inside you have publish or subscribe, right? If you want to reuse this whole channel definition in some other document, because yeah, at least the publisher and the subscribers share the channel, right? So you probably want to reuse this definition. And what happens is that you can't, because there's this publish or subscribe verb there, and it's like one will be published, but the other side will be subscribed. So you can't reuse it, and that's a pity, right?
Yeah.
So we probably will have to move things around and probably get the publish and subscribe verb out of the channel definition and move it around somewhere, come up with some other solution or something, so we can better reuse channels across AsyncAPI documents. And yeah, and that's mainly because people are what I was saying, right? If you have a public API, that's easy. You just have one AsyncAPI file, and then all your consumers will consume this AsyncAPI file, like in OpenAPI. But when you're in a distributed architecture,
Sure.
and you probably have one AsyncAPI file for each of the services or each of the applications connected to the broker. So you want to reuse these channel definitions, right? So yeah, these are the ones that are on top of my mind right now that might be breaking things.
Yeah.
Of course, as always, we'll provide migration tools. So if you want to move from version 2 to version 3 and nothing has changed, like we didn't remove anything or any feature or anything, just move things around, you should have a script. I mean, we'll provide the script for you to do it automatically with your documents. We already have one, and we will just enhance this one. And yeah, so you will not have to do it yourself manually.
And what's the time frame you envision? A month, a year?
That's a good question. I'm gonna answer this in two parts. Okay, so first of all is only recently Dale started contributing to the spec more often, and but the spec is really an area where almost nobody wants to contribute, so it was just probably my land until now, and I didn't have time, so I have no idea in like how fast this is going to move. The more contributors we have, the better, of course. It's going to be easier and faster. But now from my side, like saying that from my side, I'm gonna right now, this week, next week, I'm gonna start going into a parental leave. So so it means that for 2 or 3 months, probably I will not be doing much.
And your child is not the spec in this case.
So, which is the spec in this case. So so what happens is that, I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that I should be there to approve all the changes or anything. I'm not saying that, but I mean, if more people like you and Dale want to start contributing to the spec, I'm happy to, I don't know, from time to time show up and read those changes and read this stuff and approve, and maybe not just myself, like Lukasz can look at it. So I don't become a blocker, right? And yeah, so that will be amazing, and then we become more people on the spec side, so it's easier to keep moving on, right? So yeah, so in terms of timing, hard to say. I'll try to have proposals for, or at least Strawman proposals for I don't know, let's say the next 2 months.
Yeah.
and then from there we can somebody can champion it and continue it, or can wait and I'll do it after I come back from the parental leave. So yeah. Hope it answers the question.
Yeah, no. So it sounds like a few months at least, and as far as contributing to the spec, that's a bit early for me. No, I'm not that brave, but
yeah, it's hard, and I understand it's hard. That's why my last work these days has been on cleaning up the spec repository and the process. How what's the defining the process? How do you contribute to the spec? What are the stages that you have to be following in order to get something merged into the spec, and defining everything well, so it's less dependent on myself, right? So yeah. So that's a call out. We need help with the spec, not just the tooling.
And with things like that, I know that you don't, like, there's a lot of activity going on all the different tools and the spec and the bindings and everything within this project, but is it helpful to raise some of those bigger issues, or maybe it's on us to put them on the agenda for one of these meetings? Is that useful?
I think that would be useful, yes, to put it on the agenda for the meetings.
Yeah.
But that's great, and because meetings are being recorded, and that's fine. But if you can also create issues, or discussing issues, that would be great, just so people don't have to watch these meetings trying to scheme, and find the right information, right?
Yeah, just from a high level point of view, just because, like, I don't know what we currently have, and I'm new to AsyncAPI. I've only tried to use it in the use cases that you mentioned, right, where I was publishing and subscribing. Like, I'm always confused, like, okay, well, when I press this button, I'm going to send this payload, and then the worker is going to pick it up, or like now I'm doing Kafka and it doesn't make any sense. Am I publishing or subscribing? Yes.
Exactly. I'm publishing or subscribing. Yes.
Yes. You can
that's
do.
the feeling.
I'm explaining how you communicate. You can talk and listen. All right. So I find that very confusing, and I think that was my first contact with the community. Like, am I publishing or subscribing? Because I'm doing both. So stuff like that. Like, I would love to have a high level of, hey, there's an issue open, or there's an example we should look at, and those kind of high profile things maybe we should mention here, as well as the Slack channel chat, and obviously the way things are actually done on the GitHub issues.
Just a sec. So I find the issue about, there's an issue about publish subscribe perspective or meaning. It's this one that Michael from Sol has opened, but it's not so much about the problem. I mean, the title is not so much about the problem, but about a specific solution. So yeah, maybe it's worth to create another issue for discussion on explaining what the problem actually is. Like, why is it confusing, and trying to understand why is it confusing for people. And then once we're clear there, then we can provide a good solution, right? I have some ideas on why this is happening, but so I can start the issue if you want, and then we can discuss there. Better to discuss on the issue than on Slack, because we have the free plan on Slack, and this will get lost. So yeah.
Even in the short term, I wonder if there's that reusable the idea of being able to refer to, you can publish and subscribe these things, and being able to maybe just ref out to a reusable piece. This current structure doesn't quite fit that, but I feel like even that would be useful in the short term. I think it happens because what isn't clear is we say, oh, you can use Async API with Kafka, but you can't. You can use Async API with either a producer or a consumer. You absolutely can't use it for Kafka. And so it's very misleading.
No, you're right. Like when people say like you can use Async API with Kafka or with RabbitMQ or whatever, and they mention the broker, some people, what they hear is that you can describe the broker itself. It's like, no, it's what you described is the application publishing or subscribing to Kafka or to RabbitMQ. We actually had some people asking like, why don't we change the spec to document what happens in the broker itself instead of the application, like a menu of all the channels and messages, and we remove publish and subscribe, like like these are this is the menu of channels and messages that you can get there, and we don't know who's publishing or subscribing, but it's useful, and I agree, it's already useful. Because you, at least for discovering channels and messages, this is useful. But for generating applications, for instance, code for applications, or for generating documentation, maybe that's not super useful, right? It's like, should I be subscribing to this topic or publishing? Like, what do I do? Like, so yeah.
And that way you don't define an interface. You don't define a contract for an application. No? You define a contract for a broker.
Exactly. And then and there's even more. Like, you're assuming there's a broker, which might not be the case. Like, for instance, if you have a browser connecting to a WebSocket server, there's no broker. Or maybe the broker is a server if you want. But then it's we enter in this weird land. Like, where's the broker here? What is the broker? And so yeah. So what I tend thinking about this publish subscribe perspective, what I noticed that is that we're trying to define too many different things. Like, for instance, broker-based architectures are usually private, and they're distributed, of course. And then you have these ones like HTTP to server-sent events or WebSockets, which are usually public, and there's no broker, and there's a single connection. There's a single channel between them, a single line directly, right? What happens is that there the connection is point to point, right? On the WebSocket, it's client with the server, and that's actually, it makes sense in this case is to talk about client and server, because there's a client and there's a server. But when it's a distributed or broker-based architecture, there's no server or client anymore, at least not as in we're used to think about them in client-server architecture or paradigms. So there's a broker, there's a client. You can call the broker the server, but the server doesn't have any logic. Logic is in another client that's going to reply to you. So yeah, it's a bit confusing. And on top of that, I think the confusion with publish and subscribe, it comes from visibility. Like if your stuff is private or if it's public. If it's something public, like you're sharing with your consumers and you don't know your consumers beforehand, then it makes sense to use this publish subscribe. Like subscribe means the same as a get, let's say in a REST API, right? You do it from the client perspective. You're offering your AsyncAPI file to an unknown number of consumers, and then it makes sense to have the bursts from their perspective so they can consume it. But when you're doing things on a private side, then it's like it suddenly becomes a little bit different on the private side and using brokers as well. It becomes a little bit different than this model, right? It's like every application should have an AsyncAPI file, not just one of them. And we can also not assume that there will be an AsyncAPI file only with the how can I explain this? Like some people were suggesting that so some applications own the messages they produce, and it's like, okay, so you don't define the messages in every AsyncAPI file, but instead you point to the AsyncAPI file of the producer of this specific message. But again, we're assuming that there's only one producer of a specific message. There might be multiple producers of the same kind of message. So that's a common case when you have, like, I don't know, notifications, a notifications message. One service might be sending email notifications. Another one might be sending, I don't know, SMS notifications. And these are two different services or applications sending the same type of message. They only change the type attribute, type SMS, type email, but it's the same kind of message. So so we have a problem there. Like there can be, it's not like one producer, multiple subscribers. It's multiple producers, multiple subscribers, and relationship, right? So yeah.
But that can be solved now, can't it? You just need to refer to one common schema document that has a well-known location, a URL, essentially.
So that's what we usually propose people that track these things into a separate document, and so you can reuse. So you have the publisher, the subscriber, and both point to a common schema document, right? Which can be just a plain JSON or YAML document. It doesn't have to be any special kind of document or anything. And that, I mean, that works, but for reusing the messages, right? But still the confusion about publish subscribe is there because of the type of, you know, the topology influences the way we think about it, I would say. And the privacy, like the privacy, I mean the visibility, you know, like if something is in our land or we're exposing this to the public, And yeah, I mean, I wish we didn't have this bias ourselves, but even myself, I have this bias, and and I defined the meaning of publish and subscribe back in September 2019. It's highly confusing for me as well. But when I was trying the release candidate 1 of the spec, which was the reverse meaning, it was highly confusing sometimes for me. Like it wasn't confusing when I was doing broker-based architectures, but it was highly confusing when I was doing public APIs, like WebSockets or server-sent events. So it's like you don't have a way to win here. It's a problem, right? So with the current way of it's defined. So yeah, I guess we need to solve this. I don't want to on the whole meeting with this publish subscribe thing again.
So will we brainstorm on the issue that you will create for that? Is that where to put ideas essentially?
That would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can happily create it now. Like after the meeting, I'll create this issue, and I can link to different proposals. There's this proposal from Michael from Solas, and in this same thread, there's a Strawman proposal that I did at some point. But yeah, there's Bruno Pedro is also hopefully working on it, working on another proposal, which will introduce the concept of role. But yeah, let's see. So there are many ways.
Also, in the time that I've been confused about publish and subscribe, which is the whole time that I've been aware of AsyncAPI, in that time, OpenAPI has support for webhooks. So they are describing just HTTP requests, but in the sense that the ones that you send where you are the client, right? Because the OpenAPI spec, like you say, HTTP is quite simple. As a client, as a server, you're probably the client. But it now also describes webhooks. So they have come, and their approach to that has been completely different. And I don't know if there's something there that might inspire us as well. It's actually two separate. I'm thinking about this. It's actually two separate sections. There's the paths section and the webhook section, and they both describe the data that goes in one direction and what you will get back as a result, or what you will receive and should send back as a result. But it uses the reusable path item request. And to me, this seems a lot like the reusable channel or message description that we already discussed. So I feel like there's some stuff going on there that there's been changes in that spec, which might inspire what we could build on or avoid in AsyncAPI.
You know, the funny thing here is that on version 1 of the spec, version 1.2, we had that separated, like on different sections of the spec. Like we just try to unify everything under channels, and that was probably the problem, right? What's causing the problem. But before, it used to be topics, which is the channels now, and can't recall now, but I think it was. I remember it wasn't publish subscribe, but it was send receive verbs in another section. And there was a section for like public APIs, if you want, like one of these sections was, if your API is public, then don't use topics, use this section here, right? So maybe it makes sense. Like maybe it makes sense that we split it back and we stop unifying things under channels. And it's like, if your API is public, if you're gonna share this with your audience, then don't use channels, use this instead. I don't know. Let's see. This is something we have to, for sure, it's not something that we're gonna find a solution during a call. This needs time to think about it, and yeah, a lot of time. Trust me.
Yeah, I know. I'm the author of the webhooks addition to OpenAPI.
Yeah.
Ah.
It requires.
So I think OpenAPI is too one-sided. No, it's not. The participants are clearly client and server, and I think that's a difference here. Whereas in a message-driven system, they're all equals potentially.
Yeah, but I think here we have a little bit of separation with, are you publishing or are you subscribing? A lot of the time the answer is yes. And so, but I think that distinction for the public API, like I wouldn't necessarily name it that way, but yeah, like, can you be both ends? So for an internal microservices messaging thing, yeah, we're all the ends of all the things. And that, I think that leads us to where we expect to be able to describe the channel or the topic, and we can only describe the ends, not the wires. It's nodes, not edges. Whereas when you're communicating with something you don't own, you are only ever going to be one end because they are the other end. You're either sending it the readings from your cute IoT sensor, or you're fetching the real-time data to do something, and then you're only one of the nodes. You can't be both. So with the separation that we have now with publish and subscribe, I kind of understand that it makes sense that it has that perspective. And I still think that maybe just the reusable definitions would go a long way to solving this problem.
No, for sure. I mean, that reusable definitions of the channel will go a long way for sure. But yeah, still, like, I think the problems still persist. Like even if we manage to reuse these things, these channel definitions. But I recall a comment, a tweet from James Higginbotham on OpenAPI, and suggesting that, can't recall the whole conversation, but he was mentioning something like, the problem is that we're focusing on paths and operations on OpenAPI, or on channels and operations in AsyncAPI, and we're not using the operations as a first class citizen, if you want. And probably everything should be hanging from an operation definition. Like we should probably be giving more importance to the operation than to the channel itself. Like everything should start with, when you, for instance, when you start the sentence, I subscribe to channel X, you define I, the subject is your application, right? My application subscribes, so you're defining the operation first, and then you define the channel, right? So you don't say in the channel, I mean, you can do it, but in the channel X, I subscribe. I mean, you can say it, but it's rather weird, right? So probably it's that we're not giving enough importance to the operations, and we just have this operation ID field somewhere, that you might use it or might not. What about making it mandatory, like and forgetting about, not forgetting, and moving the importance, if you want, of the channel a level deeper. Like, imagine that instead of channels on the root level, we have operations, and then a list of operations that you can do. And inside each operation, you define if you're subscribing, if you're publishing, and to what channel, right? And then I think it might become a little bit easier to probably rearrange things as well, or augment things in the future. Like, for instance, we have publish and subscribe now, but who knows, maybe in the future, if we want to go to a down this path of becoming, let's say, the spec for all kind of APIs, then at some point we might need to have there something like request, because you want to define that this kind of what you're doing is actually requesting something, And then this request can be defined inside the AsyncAPI with an OpenAPI path item, or an OpenAPI path item definition, which is the one that has get, put, pause on OpenAPI, right? So I don't know. Again, I'm just thinking aloud, and I don't know, just giving some ideas, some thoughts that I have on my mind, in case some of you can pick up and develop or serves as inspiration for something better. Just raw thoughts for now.
So to summarize, you're gonna create an issue,
Yes.
and we continue discussion there and see where we go. And in 2 weeks, we can kind of sum up. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so let me quickly share my screen. What can you see?
Are you in a phone or tablet?
It's your font is small because it's really narrow window. If you can give us a little bit more 4:3 shape. Yeah.
Better.
And a bit more font size.
Yep.
Please.
Widescreen.
A little bit more, I will say. Yeah.
Make
Like
it bigger?
2 times, yeah.
It's because you've gone wide, like the space seems about square. So like, first of all, it was like this and the font was tiny, and now it's like this and the font is tiny. Yeah.
Now this?
I can read it now. Yeah.
Much
Is it
better.
good? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Not kidding. This is good.
Okay. So like just few updates. What changed? Damn it. Where's this? Now I can't see the chat window. Uno momento, per favor. Okay, because I'm gonna paste links real time into the chat. So you not sure if you noticed. So recently, Fran renamed the repo with the spec to spec. So it's now purely just about spec, and the rest of the documents, also a new location where we will, for example, handle those issues for the meeting. There's a new repo called community. So we're just replicating, or however you say it in English. So we're just doing what many other communities already do. So we mimic. I think it's the good word is mimic. So we mimic other communities. They have this approach, like in Kubernetes, that you have one single repo called community, where all the community related files are placed. And I guess that in a few weeks we're gonna enable the discuss tab to explore how the GitHub discussions can be used. I think it's interesting, this issue. After the meeting, you should probably have a look if you want to voice out your opinion and maybe a different proposal for how we should, how often we should do releases, if there should be some schedule, etc., etc. Not much to discuss, I guess. Something to just think about. And this one, that's a pull request. You should probably have a look. Because that's something that we discussed over last few meetings. Like the size changed. Sorry. So it's all about the question that we're getting from people quite often, like how I can contribute to the spec, how changes are done in the spec, how the process looks like. We waited a bit for someone from the community to start some proposal. Nothing happened, so that's why Fran jumped in and we started working on it sooner than setting up the TSC and the open governance model, because as you know already from Fran, soon he will be out on parental leave. So let's have this this process in place before that happens. And the cool stuff is that it's not something new. That's actually something we discovered when we worked on open governance model. We saw how GraphQL organized changes in the spec, and it looks just awesome and intuitive. So that's why even from the comment from Maciej, you can see that it's mostly copy paste from GraphQL, which I think it's okay. What's the point of reinventing the wheel? But anyway, if you find some time later, maybe you have some opinion. So yeah, please have a look. So and like kind of going back to what Gerald asked about the schemas in bindings, how to get along with this. So we have looking at this on this proposal from Fran. We already have a strawman proposal from Maciej that we need a JSON schema for bindings. Now it's just a matter of finding a person, a champion that wants to drive the topic forward through each stage, show the change in action, and then push it into the spec. Last but not least, some advertising from my side. Recently, I published a summary about AsyncAPI in February. So what happened in the initiative on February, what we started working on. But I think the most important is, I hope you noticed already, but if not, we completed working on the open governance model. It's opened for review. Sorry, Fran?
Bigger.
Bigger. Yeah. What? So it's open for review. All the links are in the blog post. We're waiting until 23rd, so it's Tuesday, I think, or Monday next week. Then we'll merge, and then like it's as written in the blog post. I think April we're gonna start already inside the foundation. There are some legal documents that still Fran, I think, has to sign, but that's just a paperwork that is not complicated. I guess it's just about hiring lawyers.
I actually just real time during this meeting I received the papers to sign, so I will probably be doing it today. So
okay, cool. So all is looking good. I highly recommend our blog post where we explain the motivation behind the open governance model in the shape that it's how proposed, how the technical steering committee will look like. So feel free to have a look. And last but not least, Google Summer of Code. Not sure if you know about the initiative. We applied. We were not accepted. I'm still trying to figure out why, because my account got deactivated and it looks like we never applied, and I didn't even get an email. But the cool thing is that we found a backdoor into the system. So Postman also applied, and we pushed our ideas through Postman as well because they were happy to do it. So, and I was already contacted by one of the students yesterday that is super happy about some of our ideas and AsyncAPI in general. So looks like, I mean, we were not able to get in through the front door, but yeah, who can stop us? Nobody. So yeah, but let's see. I think it's still gonna take a few weeks for Google to accept how many students can work for a given company during Google Summer of Code. But yeah, looks good. And yeah, so we still have 5 minutes. That's all if it comes to updates from my side. Links, I think I pasted all the links. Do you already have some maybe questions to what I shared, or some other questions? Or of course, I remember my ex-boss said once that it's not a shame to finish meeting before the schedule. So, so we can also finish 5 minutes earlier.
And congratulate Fran on the paternity leave.
True.
Thank you. Actually looking forward for it.
For those sleepless nights. Yeah.
Yes. No, actually for what comes before the baby is born. You know, these holidays that I'll have before, right before. I hope she gives me time to have proper holidays and she doesn't get born tomorrow. I hope.
Good luck then. So again, thanks a lot for joining. Next time in 2 weeks, in 2 weeks, of course, different time zone. I mean, we're still in the same time zone. It's just different time of the meeting. I mean, but we've changed hour. So remember that it's gonna be already after we switch time. So it's gonna be 6 p.m. our time zone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
And you.
Yeah.
You too.